In this video, I want to show you a really simple type of chord movement we can use that players use all the time to create some awesome sounding patterns and simple fills. So it's one of those things that's a good thing to have in your toolkit, in your musical vocabulary. The basic idea is that we're on a major chord and we're going to move to another major chord, a fourth above that one, and then back to the first one. For example, if we were on a G major chord, well, a fourth above the note G is C. As a reminder, if you need, this is a fourth. It's a perfect fourth, we can say. So it's like the fourth note of a major scale. Or you can just think of it as 2.5 whole steps away. 1 whole step, 2 whole steps, and then a half step. So in this case then, we'd be moving from a G major chord to a C major chord and back to the G. We usually don't want to jump around quite like that, so I'm going to play the C in a close position like that. That's a second inversion position, and now I can move smoothly back and forth between the G and the C. So that's a fairly normal example of a song just moving up a fourth and then back down again to get used to the sound, going back and forth a fourth. But I want to show you some other examples of how else this can be used. So I'm talking about this bit here. So at this point we land on a B flat chord. The chord a fourth above B flat would be E flat. There's a fourth. So all he does here is plays the chord. He plays another voicing of the chord, a higher position. There's another B flat. Moves up to the E flat, a fourth above. Back down to the B flat. So there's B flat, E flat, back to B flat. That bit is in the intro, and he does a similar thing in the verse. The chords are the same, but there's just a bit of a different rhythm. In the verse, there's a more energetic rhythm. So here he goes. You see, it's the same thing. It's a B flat, moving up to an E flat and back, just in a different pattern. Of course, that bit's a bit harder to play because it's quite fast, but the general idea of what's happening with that fourth movement is just the same. Now, what was different about this example to A Hard Day's Night? In A Hard Day's Night, the bass moved with the chord. Whereas here, the bass stayed the same whilst the chord moved above it. So this is a distinction that sometimes happens, and it can give us a slightly different sound. Now the reason this works is, if I play a B flat with a B flat in the bass, and I move up to E flat in the right hand, but keep the B flat in the bass, you'll notice it's still another note from that chord we moved to. So the note B flat is in the E flat chord. So we could call this a slash chord if we wanted to, an E flat over B flat. Although sometimes when it's such a quick little pattern or movement, I don't necessarily always think of it as a separate chord, but you can do. And that does give us a different sound when we keep the same bass note but change the chord. So this device gets used a lot as one way of creating some extra movement over a chord, a pattern on the chord, often as a fill, and you'll hear it quite often on music that's got some kind of blues influence. Rock and roll, soul, gospel, country, funk, that kind of thing. Just quickly, if this video has been helpful or interesting so far, then please click the like button because that really helps out the channel. So here's another example of it being used like that in the chorus for Rocketman. So like in the previous song, he's on a B flat major chord, and there's a bit of a gap in the vocal line here. So he creates a pattern using the B flat and the chord that's a fourth above, which is E flat again, and then goes back to the B flat. And the pattern was this kind of thing. So he went back and forth twice there. Elton John plays things differently every time, so there's lots of other things he could have done there. There's different rhythms and patterns you can create with this chord movement. It just has to fit the music you're playing. So if I was on a C major chord for a while in a song, I could create a pattern moving up to an F major and back, because F major is a fourth above C. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe this. Or this. You just have to be careful it doesn't clash with anything else happening in the music. We can sometimes do this on different chords throughout a song as well. A really good example of that is the Marvin Gaye version of How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You.
I needed the shelter of someone's arms, and there you were.
There's lots of bluesy, soulful piano playing throughout this version. In the first verse, the piano player plays this kind of thing. I'm just going to play the root notes of the chord in my left hand. So the first chord is a C major. This is in the key of C major. So whilst he's on the C chord, he plays this. So he's on a C, he moves to a fourth above C, which we just said was F, and then back. He's just adding a grace note in there to kind of add that extra bluesy sound to it. The next chord is actually an A minor. This is slightly different. He plays the same thing in the right hand there, but that also fits with the A minor chord, so that's a bit different. But then he moves to a G major chord, and he does the same thing from a G major chord. So he plays the G, again with a grace note, and this time moves to a fourth above G, which is C, and then back. Then the next chord is an F, so he does the same thing from F. He plays an F major and moves to a fourth above F. A fourth above F is B flat. 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth note of the F major scale. So we move from F major to B flat major and back to F major. Now you may have noticed that in the key of C major, that B flat doesn't fit because the note B flat isn't in the C major scale. But sometimes when we do this back and forth movement, we can go out the key to create a more interesting sound. So it really does happen all the time, particularly in certain styles of music, anything with a blues influence, gospel, soul influence. In these examples, we've moved back and forth quite quickly, but sometimes we linger on each position for longer, and that can give us a bit of a different feel. So I started on a C major chord, and I just moved to an F major, again a fourth above C. So that had more of a gospel kind of feel to it. In fact, it sounds like the intro to Oh Happy Day, the version from Sister Act 2, although that's probably in a different key.
Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy
Come
day.
here.
And the last example is Bridge Over Troubled Water, which does a very similar thing. It uses the same trick. This is in the key of E flat, so we've got an E flat major chord, and then a fourth above E flat is A flat. So we move from an E flat major chord to an A flat major chord, but again we're going to keep the E flat in the bass. So an E flat major, and then we'd really call this an A flat over E flat. Different rhythm, but it creates a very similar kind of feel, very similar sound. Last thing then, there's one more bit of that song I really want to show you that happens just afterwards. The chord moves to an A flat major, this time with the A flat in the bass, and then it moves back and forth from the A flat. A fourth above A flat is D flat. So we go A flat major, D flat major, back to A flat major, and then we go back to E flat major, which of course is a fourth below the A flat. That D flat chord, again, goes out the key. The note D flat is not in the E flat major scale, D natural is. So we call that a non-diatonic chord because it goes out the key, but it has a really big impact here, creates a really awesome sound. And if you like, you can think of that as the chords moving next to each other on the circle of fifths. I hope that was helpful. It's always a great thing to notice these commonalities between songs, even though in context they can sound a bit different with different rhythms and patterns. The next video coming up is actually closely related to this one, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. And if you're subscribed, hit the notifications bell so YouTube actually notifies you when there's a new video out. Thanks for watching.